All right, welcome everybody to another episode of My Favorite Horror Movie, a show where we bring YouTubers and podcasters, everybody that we know, and ask them one simple question. What's your favorite horror movie? This week we have Cody Leach. It's an honor to have Cody on, and we're talking about what I consider probably an incredibly perfect film, and that's John Carpenter's The Thing. It's another episode of My Favorite Horror Movie. Stick around, kick back, relax, and punch Gabe in the face across the screen. Make sure you do that. All right, here we go. Cody, thanks for coming on, man. It's exciting.
Thanks for the invite. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Gabe, how you doing? Victoria?
Good.
Good.
Excited.
You guys ready to talk about some thing?
Absolutely. Now, we're not talking about the Volkswagen thing, right?
No,
No,
we're
no,
talking
no,
about
no.
the fantastic forecasting.
All right.
You're not in the know? What's going on?
Yes, it's gonna be Megan Thee Stallion is the thing. I'm just kidding. It's not Megan Thee Stallion.
Oh, wow.
Wanted to rile some people up. Let's just get this started, man. Cody, how you doing today?
My daughter's been homesick, so she's on a Chucky kick. She started with Scream, moved her way over to Freddy, and now she's in Chucky. So I've been watching Chucky 2, 3, and then now today we went to Chucky 1, and the one with Andy is what she calls the one that she wants to watch. And I'm like, you got to be more specific, honey. So yeah, been caring for
More
a sick 5-year-old and
please.
watching slashers.
So my sweatshirt makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
That's what I was saying. I was telling Cody before we got started. You're speaking Gabe's language. And you said Blank Check as well. I'm like, these are all movies this guy's mentioning on the regular. He loves that stuff. So, man, it's going to be exciting. Well, I want to start off with the very basic, simple question, but go into detail on it because I want to know your history with this movie. And I know I'm going to let Gabe take over for the questions for the rest of the episode. But The Thing, man, why is it your favorite? Tell us your history with this movie.
It's one of those films, like, I feel like most of the movies that I talk about with any kind of passion starts with, I watched it with my dad. My dad was a single parent for most of my childhood, and so this was just one of those flicks that he showed me, and I just loved. I always remembered the dog scene. Like, whenever we put it on, he'd say The Thing, and I'm picturing that. And so I grew up watching it quite a bit. And as I've gotten older, where I've started to kind of get a little bit more specific with my movie taste and understand, especially being on YouTube, like why I like certain things and how to articulate why I like certain things. Just about everything about John Carpenter's The Thing is what I walk in like wanting a horror movie to give me. Like practical effects, especially nowadays, where it's just like, come on, guys, like that was perfect. That's still like the Bible. Like, why can we not do that more often? As far as character work, you're often finding yourself in horror films to where characters more often than not are the first casualty, to where you're either going to get like a slasher that's more focused on kills, or you might get a cool premise. But something about The Thing to where you have this cast of characters that's like 9 or 10 people deep, and you don't really find out a ton about any of them, but for some reason they found the perfect amount of info to give you about every single one of them, to where you watch the movie and you don't really find that you don't know these characters, or you don't care about them, or you don't have an idea. And some of them even have like personality flaws that come into play with the paranoia. You're like, that guy's kind of a dick. I wonder if he's the Thing. Or this person only cares about dogs. I wonder if he's the Thing. The way that the paranoia itself is presented in the movie, I think is kind of unprecedented. Just the concept is cool. First of all, where it just, you look like a person. There's no reason there's no way to tell until we set you on fire. But just the way that they get these people together, and I like isolation and I like paranoia whenever they're put together, because you find out who these people are, and then the paranoia sets in, and then you find out who they really are, because they always the real people come out whenever they start to feel that the walls closing in. And so the practical effects, going back to that, all the creature designs that just evolves throughout the movie. I mean, you start with the dogs, then you get the different the guy that just has like the arm that comes out in the snow. You got where the guy does the defibrillator, loses his arms, and the spider head, and all throughout the movie it's almost like you're meeting new monsters when it's the same monster. The way that the score, one of the few John Carpenter movies that's not a John Carpenter score but somehow just perfectly fits the movie.
Real real quick, he picked like the perfect guy to score this. You know, Ennio Morricone, who's done like these fantastic westerns, Sergio Leone, and I know the story goes. We put it in the notes. It's he flew over to Rome, and he like practically begged him to do the score. And Ennio tells him, "Well, you know how to do a score. Why would you want me to do this for you?" And he goes on to make like I think one of the best horror soundtracks probably ever. And it goes back to what you said. It's that paranoia. It's everything that you feel, and it's this perfect marriage of that. And to even have all these character actors from the 70s and 80s. Tom Waits from Warriors. He's in this. He plays Windows. And Keith David and all these guys. And it led by Kurt Russell, right? Who's like on this kick of I'm with John and I'm doing Elvis and I'm doing Escape from New York and I'm leaving the Disney persona and I'm becoming like this leading man. It's interesting. It's interesting because it's a whole ensemble, but it's sort of like Kurt's coming out party at the same time. It's everything that you said, man. You hit it on the head, and even the empathy when our favorite movies are ones that you remember a time and a place where you saw it. For you, it's with your dad, right? And like I could think of like Gabe's got Blood In and Blood Out. I got Goodfellas. Like you remember where you were. Even if you didn't see it in theaters, you remember where you were when you saw that one. And it just makes the experience each and every time you revisit greater. So I'm with you on that, man.
It ages perfectly, too. I mean, it's just one of those movies where, especially the practical effects, you look at it and you're like, they did this back in the 80s? Like, there's movies that come out now that can't hold a candle to that with all the advancements in technology. And I love the way that, too, as far as aging, how the movie ends on this ambiguous note that has created fan theories. And to this day, even, 40 years later, people are still debating, like, are they both the thing? Is one of them the thing? Are they both innocent? And they've had hints about, like, Dean Cundy saying that there's something that we do in the visuals with their eyes to show who's the thing. And then even fans like me will watch it and try to look in, and what is it exactly? And try to crack the code. And I don't know. It's just one of those films where, like you said, when you opened it up, it's hard to think of a more perfect horror film for me.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I agree.
And I love the way how you touch about the paranoia, and it still applies to this day, right? Like with the pandemic that we just had, right? Or still going on, whatever. It's you could see how people go in with paranoia, which side they're taking, and it's still that those themes still apply, 30 years later. So
that's a good point.
Yeah, real quick, I want to mention something. Cody, you touched on it, and it's one of Gabe's questions. Gabe, I'm going to steal it from you real quick. All these, you've seen this movie plenty of times. We all have. Everybody's got the big fan theory. Some people are mentioning it in the comments, too. Do you think there's a definitive thing at the end? Do you think it's Childs? Do you think it's McCready? Which one do you think?
I definitely think that Carpenter made the movie with a definitive answer. I don't think that he'll ever give it. So I think it's one of those things where he kind of leaves the fun up to everybody else. I personally think that Childs is the thing and McCready is still human.
I do too.
But it's very similar to Inception. I don't really think the question is really the point of the ending, though. I think it tends to be a little simpler. It's that it doesn't really matter. They still won because there's nowhere to go. It leaves with the score, so you still have that sense of dread, like, oh, did they win? Did they not? And the movie's so dark, the movie's so bleak that I tend to think that's the one little glimmer of light at the end is that, well, they've still prevented the impending apocalypse, if you want to call it that. But yeah, that's the only way that I think that makes sense to me. I don't think it makes sense as many times as I've watched it to see anywhere where McCready turns into the thing. I don't think that it would be it would be somewhat satisfying if they're still both human and it's just kind of carrying through with the paranoia thing. But I feel like Child's going away in that little third act final battle there and just coming back randomly is just enough for what I need to be like, oh, okay. But it's just McCready knowing that smile that he kind of closes out on is like, we'll see what happens because it doesn't matter, bitch. You still lost. And so that's kind of the way that I like to see it. It's still entertaining to see the fan theories. Like I've seen some people say that the breath If you're the Thing, you don't have the breath, the condensation, and the cold. I've seen people where Dean Cundy's talked about the way that they film the eyes and they look for the glimmer. And okay, well, Childs doesn't have one, but McCready does. Somebody mentioned it in the comments about he handed him gasoline instead of rum or whatever that was, whiskey. Those are all really cool details that I think are fun if that's your kind of your head canon for the movie. But for me, I think it's just I like to go simple. It's just I think McCready is alive or is human. Childs got taken by the end, but the point is that it doesn't matter.
Right. Well, because when I was doing my research a little bit, there was an interview with Carpenter back in 2013 where he said you could see McCready is still breathing and Childs wasn't. So he said like he in his mind it was McCready that was still human. But then you had David Keith at a convention say that it was that he wasn't the Thing because he was wearing an earring at the end. So based upon the prequel, the sequel, they said that the Thing cannot emulate like what did it say, inorganic material. So if you had like a heart, like a pacemaker, or you had like steel in your bones, it couldn't replicate that. So by him having an earring at the end of the movie meant that he wasn't the Thing. But then Carpenter comes back and says that the video game back that they did back in, I think it was like 2001, when McCready flies off and they rescue McCready, that was canon. So like you said, there's so many theories. Carpenter says one thing, David Keith says another thing. So they just keep on going back and forth on who's going to be, the Thing.
And I think that's the fun of it. I think it would ruin it if anybody came out with a definitive answer.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing actually that I loved the most about the prequel was that little element they added there about the inorganic material. So that is a cool detail to have if you watch them as a double bill and you're like, ooh, earring.
Yeah.
The only one I've ever heard is the breath one. I didn't know about those other ones with like the earring or the eyes. So I might want to go back and watch that scene actually to see the eyes.
Yeah, because I was looking at the trivia and I was watching the movie and I'm looking at the trivia. I'm like, wait, I see the earring in David Keith. Yeah, there's an earring there. I was like, okay, maybe he's not it.
Right. That's what I was going to bring up too. It's just that's the fun of it. I mean, you touched on it. It's the Inception effect, or another one's like Quentin Tarantino's obviously calling back this movie with Hateful Eight. And we had the letter at the ending, and you don't know if what's gonna happen to them. And Sam Jackson and Walton Goggins. That's the fun of movies. Like they don't need to give you this clear answer. Right. It's never been that way, and that's always the fun of it. The fan theories are fun, but I always take things like you with this one, like take it at face value. Like it's a cool ending. Just seeing these two dudes share a drink and ending it on that note. It's so bleak, and they're so perfect in those moments. It's the movie comes to such a quiet close, and it's a great send off for both characters, I think.
Agreed.
No, absolutely. Did you ever watch the original 1951 movie, The Thing from Another World?
I actually watched it for the very first time just before we went live because I
Nice.
wasn't able to download the questions on my phone. And so about 2 hours ago, I came up here and opened them and I saw that one and I was like, damn, I probably should watch that. So for as much of a nut as I am about this movie, it's kind of crazy that I still had never seen the 1951 original. But yeah, it's definitely does it a disservice to watch John Carpenter's version first because I don't think many people would argue that it makes it better in every way. But yeah, for a black and white movie, it's still got the concept there. It's still got the paranoia and it's still got some of that. Like there's a really cool stunt where they set him on fire that was pretty gnarly for 1951. But it's admittedly, I've got a bit of a bias to where when I watch black and white movies, sometimes it's hard to totally get it.
I'm there with you on that.
I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad I watched it, but yeah, it's probably not a movie that I would revisit.
No, I understand.
All Gabe needs is some goddamn encouragement about fucking black and white movies now.
No, it's just, you know what? It's like, as I was doing my research, like they said, John Carpenter's The Thing was more realistic to the short story that it was based on, more than, the original one is. So, but anyways, what's your favorite scene in this movie?
My favorite scene is probably the blood test scene. It's changed throughout my life. Like I said, when I was a kid, it was the dogs. At some point, it was the spider head. But I think as I've gotten older, I just really love the way that Carpenter crafts that jump scare. And again, I feel like The Thing is just like a Bible for how to do everything in horror the right way that we see done so wrong so many times nowadays when it comes to CGI over practical, when it comes to character work, or in this, when it comes to jump scares. Because especially in the past, like we'll say 15 years, maybe even 20, jump scares have kind of become one of those like horror cliches that we always love to bitch about because 90% of the time they're fake outs, they're overused, they're not even really scares, they're just startling you with a sound. And it's like, that doesn't really take much talent. I can do that on my computer in a YouTube intro if I really wanted to. But the way that he crafts this scene to where you come up with this very grounded, scientifical premise of how we're going to figure out the thing, but there's just enough doubt to it within the characters and within the viewer to where you're watching it, and the way that Carpenter lets the scene just go on forever to where you get one blood sample, it doesn't do shit, the next blood sample doesn't do shit, people are arguing, people are bickering, people are doubting, next one doesn't do anything. And so as the people in the room are losing faith in the concept, you as the viewer are losing the faith, and right when it gets you to that point to where you're like, I don't really know if anything's going to come from this. And McCready's like, yeah, I thought you'd feel that way. We're going to do you last. And it comes out and you're like, oh, fuck. And like,
that
just
scared the shit out of me. I only seen it like 2 or 3 times after last watch. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot.
Yeah. I remember, I watched it, I want to say I was like 14 or something. And it was me and my dad, my grandma, and my mom. And we were sitting there and it was a dark room. It was like 11 o'clock at night, perfect setting. And this scene came up and you saw my grandma, my mom looking at the screen like this the whole time. And you see me and my dad like this, just watching them, just waiting for them. But yeah, that's a scene that I just really appreciate the craft on it. You know, it's just like the scene in Exorcist 3, which is another great jump scare with the, the decapitation in the hallway or whatever, to where they just plant the camera there for like 3-4 minutes where nothing's happening. And it lets all of the air out of the tension to where you're like, okay, nothing must be happening. As soon as you get to that point, they hit you. And then it's followed up with, that really insane sequence where 2 people are still strapped to the chair where the one dude's morphing. And so, yeah, that entire sequence to me is just another one of those things where, like, if I was like a horror professor, there would be a chapter on that scene.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. Now, that morphine scene that you're talking about, would you say that would be your favorite special effect of the film? Or are we talking like the dog scenes or the head spider?
Probably the head spider. I mean, there's a duel where you got the stomach that opens up with the teeth, and then the arms that pull off, and then the thing shooting to the roof, and then the head coming out in the spider, and all of that all together is just like one insane practical effect after another. So yeah, to me that is kind of the pièce de résistance, I guess, as far as the practical effects work in that movie, is that entire sequence there.
Right, it's definitely one of the most iconic scenes from The Thing. I think when anybody mentions The Thing, it's one of the first scenes that comes up is that head spider.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you think it's John Carpenter's best movie?
It is. I know it is.
You know,
I think it is. I know it is.
No hesitation.
There was no hesitation. There was like
none.
I thought it would be Memoirs of Invisible Man.
Haven't seen it yet. Looking forward to checking that out for the first time.
I actually liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I like Chevy. He's fun. I gotta go back.
He's got a stacked filmography. Like I'm only 3 movies deep in my review series, and I've already given like 2, almost like 3.75, and these are just movies that I like. So you start getting into the ones that I love, where I'm looking at my calendar, I'm like, damn, you try to do a top 5 for Carpenter, and there's some passionate opinions out there. Usually the top 2 is either The Thing or Halloween. Those are tend to be the popular ones, but it's no hate towards Halloween, because Halloween's an absolute classic. But I just think when you look at Halloween and what Halloween does great, and you look at what The Thing does, and especially when you look at the timeline of the movies that he released, where you have, Dark Star, student film, you have Assault on Precinct 13, little exploitation action flick. Then you got The Fog, or you got Halloween, very simple slasher film, kind of set the template. Then you got The Fog, very simple ghost story. Escape from New York, a little more action, then Assault on Precinct, but kind of the same tone, and then The Thing. And it just feels like this creative,
and along the way, he
peak.
even does 2 great
TV movies. Yeah,
TV
Elvis.
movies. Elvis, I really enjoy that. It's long. It's very long. It's a lot of those older TV movies are like 4 hours, and I think it was like 3.5. But it just shows you he can do anything. For a guy that in every interview says, I kind of suck. Like any question about him, he's like, I don't know. He can kind of do it all. Even Big Trouble in Little China, one of my childhood favorites, is like the template, you could say, for even Marvel movies. A lot of Marvel directors go, oh, well, like Taika Waititi, for better or worse, goes, Big Trouble in Little China was the template for my Thor movies, or whatever it is. And to me, it's a dude that was ahead of his time. Like, he didn't even know the magic he had. And he was so worried about, well, I'm not with the cool kids. I'm not with Spielberg and De Palma and Coppola, so I must not be that great. But he truly was. He was like, for a lot of these people and these nerds that grew up in the early 80s, he was the dude. He was the champion, which is crazy to me. Even like Scorsese wrote some article in Fangoria. It was a letter about how much he loved John Carpenter. And what you're saying, that level of expertise that he brings, especially in that 80s run, it felt like he could do no wrong. I mean, I don't know many directors that have the run that he has. By the time you have Escape from New York, The Fog, Big Trouble in Little China, The Thing, all these movies are like back to back to back to back. It's awesome. It's awesome that he's able to. I mean, Christine too. Christine's another one that I feel like flies under the radar, because besides the score, it's kind of the least John Carpenter movie out of his horror movies, I would say. Like, it's definitely, like, all right, this is Stephen King's thing. Let me do the Stephen King thing. But the man had it's a fucking magical run. I know everybody wants to make the conversation Halloween all the time.
Right.
But
all these other movies are as good, if not better.
So,
yeah, I'm with you. I feel like it overshadows the rest of his filmography,
Yes.
and I feel like he even knew that whenever he got the success of Halloween, because he immediately followed up with The Fog and tried to do something small scale, and did the whole movie in the first shoot trying to just stick to the ghost stuff. And it was only because he kind of got a little worried about the slasher craze that was happening in 1980 after Halloween, and the studio got a little worried that they made him reshoot it, and he wanted to reshoot it to add kills. Because he's like, fuck, nobody's going to watch this. There's no kills.
Yeah, it's true. There's another one I was thinking of that I honestly liked that Carpenter did.
In the Mouth of Madness?
I mean, yeah, that's a great one. The TV one, what was the TV one? The other one, Somebody's Watching Me. That was one that a lot of people rediscovered a few years ago. That's pretty good. I mean, he takes a lot of concepts that, probably would have been used for Halloween 2 with the high-rise stuff, but again, this is a guy that can do anything, like from comedy to, I mean, Starman, like it's a drama, Jeff Bridges. It's wild. It's completely, it's crazy. Just everything that he can do, every genre, man. It's crazy.
It's funny because he has such a, to this day, he still has such like a problem of authority and such a permanent middle finger to the industry and how it works and all the drama that has to go on, that it's kind of poetic that Rob Zombie ended up remaking Halloween, because I don't think Rob Zombie has near the talent of John Carpenter. It's my own opinion, but he definitely has that same kind of don't give a fuck, I do what I want approach.
Sure.
And so I like the fact that he kind of had this, by definition of most directors that we talk about in best ofs, he has kind of a shorter run. And he went like a decade between movies there towards the end, to where almost like how Quentin Tarantino's talking about, he wants to stop at a point because he doesn't want to get bad, and he just wants to have this tight little filmography. I feel like John Carpenter came very short of having that if he didn't direct like the last 2 movies that he did.
Yeah, it's true. Man, and that's like, he kind of just gave up. Like, I'm going to play video games. He does the ward later on with Amber Heard, and that's about it. And he's kind of hinted at directing maybe again, but not so much. Let's go back to the testing scene, because I think, to me, this is a highlight of his directing. One of the biggest highlights of his career. If I have to pick a scene from John Carpenter's filmography, like I can't pick anything from Big Trouble because it's a big broad comedy. But the thing, the testing scene is this huge sequence. We got Clark with the knife, and he's gonna stab McCready, and you don't know when it's gonna happen. He's gonna do it at some point, and it goes to the school of Hitchcock, back and forth, and it's the tightening of the rope, and it gets tighter and tighter, and then McCready's like, "Fuck this!" Like everybody's getting tested, and it gets tighter and tighter, and it keeps going until you have this burst of the effect, and you have Palmer's head getting ripped apart, and he's shaking, and there's a release of comedy as well. Like he does everything. There's suspense. It's scary as shit. You have this great practical effect, and you kind of can't help but nervously laugh because it's so disgusting. He's like flying to the ceiling, grabs window, puts it in his fucking
being all extra.
form. Like it goes like if there's ever a Sam Raimi moment in John Carpenter's career, it's like this moment right here. It's like the most Evil Dead thing ever. But I had to highlight that because you were talking about your favorite effects, and when we're talking about his filmography, to me that's like one of the crowning highlights of Carpenter is just being able to mix the dread with explosion of violence. And it's that man, it's that one.
And he's usually somebody that kind of excels with simplicity too. He always is kind of understated and always tries to go the most basic route. I mean, Halloween 1978, for as many people that love it, it's a very simple movie. It's a very subdued movie. Same thing with The Fog. And The Thing, that's why it's so wild, because just conceptual and the special effects and the action that is in it seems like such a bigger movie than everything that he did before then. But yeah, he's always somebody that seems to excel with the simplicity part. So when you get those explosions that you were talking about, that's when it's almost like he's letting his creativity just explode for a minute, to where he's like, okay, I got to get extra as fuck for a second. And then he goes right back down to simplicity again.
Right. Gabe, what do you got? What's your next question, man? You got a whole list of them.
I do. Well, because you guys were talking about his filmography, right? So
I had to, because I feel like we had to touch on it. He's got a storied filmography, right? Like, it's just all over the place.
All his success, right? All of a sudden, this movie comes out, and the critics just hated it, right?
Yes.
We just talked about it. You know, Roger Ebert called it a barf bag type movie. The New York Times also described.
I'm like, that's a good thing.
His review was kind of positive.
Right. The New York Times described the thing as foolish and depressing. So what do you think critics hated this movie, though? I mean, obviously we know it's a classic, right? It stood the test of time. But why in like 1981, whatever, they hated this movie?
I have to assume, and I hate doing this because I'm one of those people that hates trying to assign motivations to reviewers and everything, because I deal with that shit so much myself. They're like, you didn't like this because of this, and you love this. And I have to assume that there was this negative stigma to horror back then, where slashers were starting to ramp up because of Halloween. You had Friday the 13th and all these movies. And so the trashier side of cinema was starting to get a lot more focus back then. And so I just feel like a lot of these more prestige critics were just a little bit jaded. And so anything that smelled like horror, they're like, well, this can only be so good, so let's walk into it with that expectation. And I also think that there's an element to this that was just ahead of its time. And that does happen. We get those movies sometimes where, I mean, you look at films like Shawshank Redemption, people talk about that being like possibly the greatest movie ever made, and that was a movie that bombed, and that was a movie that didn't win any awards, and it just got a life because of VHS. And so there's weird moments in film history where you get something like this, to where it's so damn good that people don't know how to interpret it, and then their lack of interpretation, their lack of understanding, they just interpret that as the movie must suck, or the movie must be bad, or a barf bag movie. And aside from that, I feel like a lot of the prestigious critics, like famously Ebert and Roper, they always had really weird opinions when it came to horror. Like we were talking before we went live, and I had a little bit in the Hitcher review to where they went hard about how horrible and disgusting that movie is, because it's about subdued homosexuality, and it's about sadomasochism. And I'm like, where the fuck are you seeing all of that in this movie? And so you see these people that are arguably the most known and respected critics, and they say shit sometimes where you're just like, what fucking movie did you watch? And so, yeah, I have to assume that's what it was, because, you know, we're in a time now where just over the past 4 or 5 years, horror has started to kind of bleed into prestige. where you got films or companies like A24, Blumhouse on a good day, where
Ari Aster going, I don't make horror movies.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're starting to get these movies that are very much horror films that are Oscar caliber, or that critics are loving, or things like that. And so it's a very weird time that we're in, and I can only imagine that weirdness from just 5 years previous to where horror always feels like the beaten redheaded stepchild of film was even worse back in that day, because it was starting to get that surge of just being the trashy VHS covers with something cool and gnarly that kids would love to go and watch when they were in their teenage years. And so that's my assumption. Beyond that, I don't know. This is one of those movies where you look at and you're like, how the hell did everybody, like literally almost everybody, trash this when it came out? I just can't compute it.
I think you were on the right track though, as far as like home video sales, because apparently the mixing on this was so good and the sound was so good that when they released it on VHS, a lot of like the audio files were using this movie, so you could like set up your speakers to left and right Dolby. So that's like how good the mixing was for this movie, how good the the music was. They were using the thing. They would put the thing on the TV and then set their speakers or audio speakers to make sure that they were doing left and right Dolby on it. So I think that also played a big part of it going forward.
Sounds like an excuse I would give my wife for why I'm watching it again. Like, set my speakers, shut up.
Different.
Well, that's the excuse I give Victoria with the Batman. I'm tweaking
the visuals.
Just looking how the 4K looks. I just want to see it. The HBO Max version, Apple version.
He says it's the Batman, but it's the Batman and Robin.
Nothing wrong with that movie. George Clooney's the best. Well, you talk about Siskel and Ebert, right? Like some of the biggest film critics of all time.
Yeah, I said Ebert and Roper. I'm a few decades behind. Sorry.
Ebert is a guy that I love. I read a bunch of his books in film school and high school, and he really does know everything there is to know about movies. But there's a ton of things going on at this time. One, they were a fan of Carpenter. They championed Halloween, and they spread the word. But stuff, again, it goes back to what you said. Friday the 13th, I think, really got their blood boiling. And Maniac, too. Maniac pissed them off.
Yeah, they didn't seem to like gore. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they loved Halloween, because Halloween is almost bloodless. So anytime that you got anything with gore, they like to throw around the word pornography a lot. I think
that was the word.
Yeah. So they would throw that out a lot. And this, I mean, it's not slasher gore, but it's certainly gore and blood and guts and alien pieces. And so, yeah, if they don't like gore, yeah, I see where the barf bag comment came from.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
No, absolutely. I mean, the movie did. It did poorly on opening weekend. Just made $3 million overall during its runtime. It made $19 million overall. So, but again, it did open up against E.T. and Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, which were released 2 and 3 weeks prior to this.
Yeah,
and
Rocky, had no chance.
And Rocky 3 was still like hanging in the top 3 at the box office too. So
E.T. is a big one too, though, because you got that generation defining, family friendly, cute alien that everybody wants to have a stuffy of, and then in the next theater is another version of Alien that you would not want anywhere in your house. And so, yeah,
rated R E.T.
The screams of horror as everybody's tear jerking.
You have the cute little, E.T., and then you have the head spider. Which plushie are you gonna pick?
Exactly. Did you see that new Alien movie this weekend? The one where they ripped the dude's arms off and like exploded and turned into a spider? No, dude, the one that ate fucking Reese's Pieces. What movie did you see?
Yeah, I mean, Carpenter lost, the job of Firestarter because of that, because of this movie.
Yeah.
It's probably for the best because he made Christine.
Sure. Victoria, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, you're like talking about the hand and stuff, and we were kind of talking about favorite scenes earlier. I was thinking about it after reading the notes. I know this is like totally backwards, but I really like the one where the guy does have like it's just his hand and he's starting to turn into the thing, and like everyone's crowding around him. I think it's so scary. Like the guy almost looks scared in a way, even though he's the thing. Like it's terrifying. They're all really realizing what's happening. I think it's really, really scary. And we were watching it in the dark, and I was like, I gotta go. I don't want to watch this. First the dogs, now this dude. I can't do it.
I love the sound that he makes. It's
yes.
Yeah, that's what's scary.
But it's the way that he has that. Yeah, the way that he uses the sound mixing and echoes it, where it sounds like like you said, it's almost like he's scared, like he's calling out for something, but at the same time, it's so terrifying. I'm like, maybe he's saying, "Fuck all of you," or like I don't know, but
McCready's
kind of like a
go.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like Donald Sutherland makes right. It's literally it's that, and that's such a weird, eerie scene, and he's got the fucking weird lobster-looking hands going on. But yeah, it's so good.
Kurt Russell doesn't hesitate. He's like, "You're on fire." That's it.
No I love his character in the movie too, because I know we talked about it a little bit earlier. McCready and Kurt Russell in this movie is very similar to how Arnold Schwarzenegger was in Predator. And where I say this a lot when I talk about Predator, it's the only Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that doesn't feel like an Arnold vehicle. He's just one of the guys there. And it feels the same way here. Like, you know, Kurt Russell had this iconic role with Snake Plissken. Don't have the filmography in front of me. I don't know if he did anything in between that and The Thing that was big, but he was rising, you know, and he's an action guy now. He's making this big change. And then you put him in The Thing and he's just one of the people. He's just the helicopter guy. But it's his attitude throughout the movie that kind of makes him this somewhat leader of the group by the back half. And so I really love the way that he, like I said, with the ensemble cast and the way you know just enough about everybody, there's nobody that overshadows each other. By the end of it, I think the two bigger personalities are the ones that are the survivors at the end. But Kurt Russell brings something to McCready that it's like he knows his place in the story and he's not trying to overshadow it with how cool he can be.
Right. No, understandable. Now, Ernie Hudson lost the role to David Keith. Do you think?
Can I add something quickly?
Yeah.
Because you guys talking about did he do anything between The Thing? He actually did The Fox and the Hound.
The voice of that's right. Russell, yeah, he did. Yeah.
It's like, God damn it, back to Disney.
Back to fucking Disney. Yeah.
All right, sorry, Gabe, keep going.
So I was going to ask you if you thought, like, if Ernie Hudson would have played Childs any different. Like, do you think there would have been like a huge difference between Ernie Hudson and David Keith?
Oh yeah. I mean, David Keith, there's a Keith David. Keith David. Sorry, yes, sir. Keith David. There is
Goliath. All right, Goliath.
I wanted to see how long he was gonna go.
yeah.
Listen, this goes back to Psycho 2005 again, man. I gotta make a little bit of a.
Keith David has such a distinct personality to him in most of his roles, to where he's got that grit, he's got that little bit of a smart assness to him, a little bit of that problem of authority, and that to me, that is the character of Childs. And so while Ernie Hudson, I'm sure, would have done something great, I can't see him doing that version of Childs. Yeah. To where it just, that's a role that I just feel like it's almost like Keith David just went on set and they're like, here's your lines, just be you. And we got that character. So yeah, that's interesting. I would have been interested to see that. But yeah, I love Keith David whenever he works with John Carpenter. I'm curious to see what he's going to do with this new Stuckman movie.
Plus, I think Keith has that super smooth, very like sexy voice, you know, very deep.
Ooh, okay.
Imagine there's a version of this movie that exists with Ernie Hudson, Christopher Walken as McCready, and Jay Leno. All right, Jay Leno. Who was Gary Shandling? It was for Palmer. They were thinking Jay Leno and Gary Shandling.
Totally different movie.
Different movie.
It's an SNL skit.
It would be hilarious because Walken being so fucking paranoid, going deer hunter mode with like the flamethrower and shit, just like.
Do you understand the concept of this blood test?
It would be awesome. It would be different. It would be way different. That's the Tobe Hooper version, Gabe. I know we mentioned Tobe Hooper at one point was in the running to direct this. That would have been.
Damn.
I'd see that. Tobe Hooper directing this fucking batshit crazy Christopher Walken led The Thing.
That would have been crazy to see.
That would have been fun, man. I don't know, Gabe. What else do you got, man? What else? We got any questions left? I know Bill Lancaster, the writer of this, is a Western actor. I didn't even know. Dude starred in like a bunch of Westerns from the 50s and the 60s. And he also wrote The Bad News Bears. And Carpenter I guess, was a huge fan of the Bad News Bears, and the Bad News Bears go to Japan and said, "I want you to write the thing with me." And he like fought for him at the studio level to get this dude to write this movie.
Not Bad News Bears.
Yeah,
I
he
can
was
just imagine that pitch meeting. Like, all right, stay with me. I got this movie about aliens that morph into crazy shit and eat people and turn into them. And I want the dude from Bad News Bears to write it with me.
right.
Who's with me?
They'll just sit there with their paper, like, all right.
Well, I mean, like, what is it? Maybe back then, like, you know, you wouldn't want to get like a kid or comedy writer to do horror, but I mean, we've looked at it now, right? That's where the best horror is coming from, is our family and comedy writers.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I think at that point too, they just learned to trust Carpenter, because he got a lot of shit for wanting Kurt Russell in the first place with Escape from New York. They wanted Clint Eastwood or somebody like that, and he's like, I want that Disney guy. I want him. I see something in him, and he fought, and he just. We keep bringing up Tarantino. It's one of those things where it's just like after he gets enough right, you're just like, okay, fuck it, whatever you want.
Go for it.
Right.
I saw a question on here that you had, Gabe. I don't know if it was Gabe or Tony, but I want to ask it to everyone. Would you be able to survive this movie? Do you think? I'm gonna go first because I say no, because the dog would have got me. That would have been it. Leave me alone with that dog. I'm the thing in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, I don't know. We all like to think that we would, but you got to think of what you would need to see to believe that was actually going on, and would it be too late?
Yeah, true.
I don't know, Gabe. What about you, man? I don't think I would.
I like Cody said, I would like to think I would. I think that I have a lot of disbelief in a lot of things. Like, I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, so I would like to believe. Like, I would think this is something like weird. Well, no, at the end of the day, it'd get me. I mean, there's no way I'd be able to survive that.
You know what we need? We need a crossover with the gang from It's Always Sunny coming across the thing. I mean, the paranoia and the tension, and DeVito would probably be the only one. Maybe Danny DeVito would be somebody. It's Frank Reynolds. He'd be able to survive an encounter. Everybody else.
Scooby-Doo episode would be cool because you already got the dog.
There you go. That would be terrifying, man. It's seeing fucking Shaggy and Velma being torn apart by this fucking alien creature.
All right, gang. Who is the thing?
It's still
it would be just endless. Endless. Man, you know, I want to touch on Hooper for a second. Do you think Hooper would have done a good job with this?
Toby Hooper?
Yeah.
I don't know. He's not really on my horror Mount Rushmore, to be honest with you. I really like Poltergeist, but that's a movie that I didn't really have a lot of nostalgia for. I didn't watch it much growing up. It's kind of one that I discovered a couple of years ago. I've seen it, but for some reason I watched it a couple of years ago, and I'm like, this is fucking great. Why haven't I watched this more? Texas Chainsaw, I've always been kind of on the fence with. It's like a movie I respect more than I enjoy, I guess I would say. Mm-hmm. So it would be interesting, but I don't know. This is a movie that's just, it seems so perfect that it's hard for me to imagine any of the pieces changing, any of the roles, any of the directing, anything like that. So I can't think of anything else in Toby Hooper's like filmography that would make me think like what this would even look like under him. That's a really weird concept for me to try to think of.
Right.
Right. I mean, especially coming from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right, to doing this within the span of a couple of years, just for him to like sort of come off that type of movie to do the thing, it would be definitely weird to see him do.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the prequel? I'm assuming all of you have seen it.
I have not seen it in a very long time. Ooh. We were gonna watch it the other night, and I remember not hating it. I know a lot of people do hate it.
I think we're gonna watch it right after this, to be honest.
Yeah, we were about to watch it. But I did want to ask you about that. That was gonna be one of my questions, because a lot of controversy came from the practical effects, and I know they originally shot it with practical effects. So run down your thoughts on the prequel. What are your thoughts on it?
It does so many incredible things narratively, with being like this thematic through line to where you could literally watch it as a double bill. And I remember when I went to go see it with my dad in the theaters, because the movie ends setting up everything that kicks off John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
And so I remember watching it in theaters and then coming home and immediately putting on John Carpenter's The Thing. And the first half hour of the movie, you just see all of these things where they find the aftermath of the prequel, and everything was so perfectly like an axe in the wall and all these little details that just immediately bleed into that movie. The detail
we were, dog too,
and on the dog, the detail we talked about earlier with the earrings and the piercings and the fillings, all that was a really cool new element. But God, they fucked it with those effects to where I can't stand watching it. And I remember when I was in the theater, because that's what the movie's known for. And it's one of the biggest things ever that I've seen, to where I'm just like, please, I want the phone number of the fucking producer that decided to do this, and just want to tell me why. Just explain your headspace to me, please. I'm not going to cuss you out, even though you deserve it, but just tell me why the fuck you did this. It's one thing if they decided, because they're stupid, that we're just going to go with CG from the get. It's another thing entirely when you hire a company to do practical effects that there's YouTube videos for that look fucking incredible. And they say, you know what? No, that's not working. Let's paint over it with this garbage CG. And it kills the movie for me. Every time that there is a thing sequence, it just drops my enjoyment from here to here, to the point where, like, the third act, the final monster is one of the most horrendous things I've ever seen in CG, where you get this gigantic monster and it's just the dude's face. And I'm like, I could do better than that with fucking Adobe Premiere. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm ranting.
I remember,
no, it's true.
Joe Edgerton, the standoff between him and Mary Elizabeth Winstead at the end with the earring thing, and it's the first time the Thing doesn't straight up act like fucking crazy. There's actually like a bit of motivation there in that conflict. That was one of the scenes from that one that I remember the most and remember liking the most. But to echo your sentiment about the effects, that's one of the things I remember heavily disliking. And it's bizarre, the story behind that, because as far as the internet knows, one producer who knows saw early cut of the movie and said, I don't like these effects, they look cheesy. Go reshoot everything. And they went off and they reshot everything. And the director was so keen on going, it's got to be like Carpenter. They use the anamorphic lenses, just like the first movie. We need the score to be exactly like this. I want to shoot it this way. I want it to be on 35 millimeter, not digital. It's all inspired choices. And it's crazy to think at one point in time, well, still now, but movies are made very reactionary, you know? So if there's a lot of CGI in horror movies at the time, somebody in that room when they're testing this goes, okay, well, let's go reshoot this and we'll use CGI. It goes back to like Rings from a couple years ago. Rings is like rumored
to
be
the
thing that killed Friday the 13th. Paramount pulls the plug on Friday because Rings didn't do well.
That was
like
so
it's
bad.
Two things that just don't even make any sense. Like, okay, like that.
Apples and potatoes,
right?
People.
Yeah. It's strange,
like,
but
makes sense.
I'm convinced that they made that strictly from like everybody's remaking things. We have this, like, let's do something with it, even though it wasn't a big hit, but we'll do it with CGI. Yeah.
It sucks, man, because for as amazing as this movie is, to where it's literally one of those movies where you're never going to fill its shoes, it's a really good companion piece, but they just, one of the most quintessential elements of it, they completely destroy. And so every time I watch it, I try to get past it. I try to like do this and try to appreciate the things that they did well, but it just, it's heartbreaking. Right. There's no monetary reason why they would ever be motivated to do it, but I really wish we could get a cut of the movie with that shit removed.
Yeah.
And just see what it would have looked like, because I feel like we say this all the time nowadays, but it's such a shame. I've never met a single person that doesn't share that opinion. I've never met a single person that goes, I think the CGI looks good, or I prefer that. I've never fucking heard that.
Well, I'm about to exit out of this conversation then.
Have you seen the prequel before you go on some crazy
about to have a hot take?
That was an unintentional little segue there. Please do tell.
Do you have your graphics?
I know, like that fucking hot take graphic.
No, I've seen it. I saw it when it first came out. In fact, I saw the prequel, which I didn't know was a prequel. I mean, I've been in love with movies for so long, but
Mhm.
there's movies that I missed.
We
A
all
lot of
have
people
those.
know, so I never saw the thing, but I saw the prequel when it came out. I didn't think it was too bad back then, but obviously now from seeing this now the last 2 months ago and yesterday, like it doesn't compare. If you would have asked me like 2 years ago about the thing, prequel, I've been like, oh yeah, it's great. But after looking at the CGI and comparing it to the practical stuff, there's no comparison whatsoever.
And that shows you how big of a blow the CGI is, because before you even
Mhm.
knew what to compare it to, you thought it was great.
Yeah,
Because everything else is really damn good in that movie. But when you know what it should look like, when it's supposed to look like, all of a sudden it's like,
yeah, like you said, like when you were just showing like just the face, and I was just like, yeah. Now I'm
Mhm.
just like, why did I think? I mean, not that why did I think it was good? I like what I like. It's just now I know, like, hey, it's not as good as it could have been.
Mhm.
It missed the
I feel
mark.
like when it's practical too, like you can like feel it a little bit. Like when the guy's head is coming off for the head spider, it's like you can kind of feel because you see like the tearing, the
Mhm.
stretching. When it's CGI, it's like, well, that's a computer. Like I don't know if I
Yeah.
explained that well, but it's kind of like it's as if
The
your own
uncanny
arm is
valley.
tearing.
You
Yeah.
know
Yeah,
it.
you
Yeah.
know you're looking at a PS2 graphic, and so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
you have that part of it, and I feel like practical just ages so much better, because
It does.
even if it's lower quality practical effects, or it's something from the 70s and 80s that doesn't near compare to what we've seen now, it still looks tangible, and so you don't have
Mhm.
near the uncanny valley, to where I feel like CGI, especially until like the past 5 years or so, it just ages the movie immediately, because you can look at something, you're like, oh, that's early 2000s CGI. That's when
Yep.
we thought it looked awesome for like
Fucking
3 weeks, and then
right,
The
like
faculty.
The Rock in The Mummy Returns.
yeah,
Right. You just like, what?
exactly.
You look at it now, you're like, what the fuck is that? You know, like
Hmm.
what is The Rock doing on this? Like, what is that?
Right. So like
But
Tony and Victoria sent me the 4K copy of the thing, and I watched that, and that one aged so well in 4K. Like I
Hmm.
watched the Predator and the Terminator in 4K, and that one those didn't age as well.
Hmm.
And or when they upscale it to 4K, like the thing did. Like the thing looked like you could set that and re-release another re-release in the summer for the 40th anniversary, but it still aged so well, and it's done so well.
Yeah, 4K with horror is hard, because there's some
Yep.
movies where they didn't want you to look at it in HD. And so when you start looking
Please.
at it in HD, you're like, that's plastic. Or, you see Sleepaway Camp is one I throw out, to where you got a scene where it's a
Yeah.
silhouette of Angela that the Ricky stood in for. But when you watch it in HD, you see Ricky's face, and you're like,
Damn.
that throws that all off now. And so people always ask me, like, well, you getting the HD 4K for that? I'm like, I don't know, because some horror doesn't need to be in 4K. Some horror didn't even need to be in Blu-ray.
Okay. Because true.
I think it. Plus, they're smoking so many cigarettes on these sets in the 80s. It's just like, I don't think
Mhm.
they thought about somebody 20, 30 years from now is going to upscale everything we did and make it look
And
perfect.
they can see the
They weren't
smoke.
thinking that. They'd be like, maybe we'll make some money on this through VHS. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it. But I want to talk about the CGI, because the CGI versus practical argument, because
Mm-hmm.
it's one that we still have to this day, right? With even now, the new thing is de-aging. We go see a
Mm-hmm.
Marvel movie
Oh
and
my
fucking
god.
Sam Jackson looks weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't look right.
It
Uh,
Chapter 2 is the worst
it Chapter 2 is
offender in
a
the
big
last few
notable
Oh,
years.
one,
De
and they
Niro,
also they even
De,
have
Uh,
oh, don't say De Niro.
De
You can say De
Niro.
Niro. It's been a couple years. I'll back down on it. I did. You know what? The De Niro thing, I feel like could have been great, but even though I'm like, all right, all they did was de-wrinkle him. Fine. Like the performances are so good in that one, I'll give it a pass. But yeah, I guess you see when he's beating up the dude, you go, oh, that's clearly 78-year-old De Niro beating up an old man. That's um,
you
but
going ham.
yeah, but with the comparisons, It Chapter 2 is a great one, right? Because I like that movie, but I do think the CGI in that takes me out of it. Where they even have a callback to The Thing, and it's just like, wouldn't you want to do that with practical
That was
effects?
pretty good. I
You're
like
calling
that.
back a movie. But I feel like with practical, you feel it, and it's dirty and it's gross. Barbarian's a great example. It just came out.
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh,
can't think of anything in that movie that is CGI,
Mm-hmm.
unless they did some crazy David Fincher background shit. I don't know, but that movie feels dirty and it feels gross. Evil Dead, the recent one, also. But yeah, I don't know. Like, what do you feel about CGI in horror movies specifically?
I mean, CGI is a great tool, but I feel like they use it too often and they make it the main tool in the belt. Like, you can use CGI to kind of do some touch up, to add a little bit here and there, and I think that works really well. But it's when you see like it, I would say even It Chapter 1 was the biggest thing that I disliked about that movie, and everything else was so good to where I grew up watching Tim Curry's Pennywise, and that's one of 2 characters that ever really freaked me out as a kid. And you go back to some of those early effects with his teeth, and even some of the things that haven't aged so well, where he turns and jumps into the little hole and the hole widens and all that stuff. But it's still, for some reason, even though it looks bad and looks cheesy, it still doesn't really distract me from the movie. Where when you see CG spider with Bill Skarsgård face on it going around, and I'm just like, I'm playing a video game right now. What is this? And it's weird. It's two different uncanny valleys, and I feel like one of them is just so much shorter. So that there's some horror films that are really big budget or high concept where you can do CG stuff and it just fits. But I feel like when you're trying to be grounded, which is very key, if you're trying to trick the viewer into thinking this could happen, this is real, and then you show them something like that, it's like, but that's not real. So you just fucked it all up.
Man, Cody, thank you for coming on, man. This has been an incredible conversation. We got into so much. And,
yeah, no problem.
It's really awesome. Gabe, anything you want to say, or Victoria, before we start wrapping up?
I wish the dogs didn't die. Thank you.
The dogs get fucking bad in this movie, man.
I said, tell me when it's over. I don't want to watch the dogs die, even though I know
the dogs get it bad.
I happen to turn my head when the dog gets shot in the chest, like the real dog. I'm like, no, why? Why did I look?
So, real quick, right? Because you and me, you, Cody, and I are the only ones that have facial hair. It took Kurt Russell about a year.
I don't know if I count. I'll count you guys.
It took him about a year to grow that
fuzzy
beard. How long do you think it would take you to grow one of those Kurt Russell beards?
Oh man, I don't know. Because like my facial hair drives me nuts once it starts to grow to a certain length. Like I always try to keep it kind of close to the skin where it is, to where I feel like once it starts to get bushy, it just like I feel it when I lay down on my pillow, and it just I don't know. I would need a paycheck like Kurt Russell's to grow
for real.
much. Yeah. Maybe a year, because it does grow, but I don't know. My wife sometimes, she's like, I want you to have one of those like burly Sons of Anarchy beards, and I'm like,
oh my god,
don't hold your fucking breath, because as soon as I get to like here, I'm
they get to I've had it out to longer. Right now, just but yeah, they do start to get itchy, and it's just a big old hassle with them.
It's hard with the mustache too, because you don't want to have the mustache be super short and the beard be burly. But whenever my mustache grows, it likes to curl, and then it starts touching the inside of my nostrils, and so I'll be doing that all the time. Looks like I have a coke habit.
So it grows on the inside, and then it goes like into my mouth. So I'll be eating it, and I'll be like, okay, wait a minute, I gotta pull it out.
I would have to cancel it. I would have to straight up like be on a deserted island. It would take me 5 fucking years. Maybe I'll get like a quarter of the way there. It would take me at least 5-6 years in order to pull that off.
It takes Tony like 2 months to grow a 5 o'clock shadow.
Yes, I got the Ralph Macchio thing, man. People don't know if I'm like 26 or 16, and I go,
oh my god,
either one works. It's fine. I think that'll about do it, man. Cody, what do you have coming up?
A lot of John Carpenter shit. I just dropped my The Fog review a couple hours ago. And then I plan on doing Escape from New York at least by Thursday. We got Pearl coming out. I'll be seeing that Thursday. And they just announced the sequel, Maxine. I'm very excited about that.
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah, that was a very unexpected, cool thing to wake up to. Speaking strictly on The Thing, I'm hoping to get my review out for that on Sunday. And then on Tuesday, we have that same thing we got with Jeepers Creepers 3, where you get one night to go see it. So I'm going to try to drive about an hour to Beaufort, South Carolina, and go check that out. So that's kind of the next week for me, is John Carpenter and Jeepers Creepers.
I didn't realize that one was coming out so soon.
Yeah. It's one of those things where the third one, I think it was just because of who was directing it. They're like, okay, you get one night in theaters, and whoever wants to come can come. And this one,
no children allowed.
This one, I don't know what to expect.
Kids getting free.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect, but it's the same thing. It's one of those Fathom events where you get one night to go see it, and then it'll probably be on streaming by October 3rd.
That's me tomorrow with Clerks 3.
Damn, and I think we got Rob Zombie's Fathom events for the Monsters coming up too, so I'm excited for that.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I have no idea.
I pre-ordered the Blu-ray. I already bought the movie. I was like, I'm gonna buy this one out.
This is how funny the Monsters is. So it's a Netflix release, and I don't know if you guys do any Netflix screeners or not, but when you get screener access for Netflix, they have a website you go to, and it shows all their upcoming releases, and you click on them, and it gives you your contact info for who you need to go. The Monsters isn't even available, so it's like they're not even doing screeners for it.
Oh my god!
They've not promoted this movie.
No,
they've promoted everything.
I was so excited for it because Rob Zombie's one of those guys that I want to see succeed. Like I hate the fact that I don't like a lot of his movies, but I'm just like, I want this dude to fucking rule one. Just bring one out that shuts everybody up. And I thought this was going to be just weird enough to do it. And then as soon as we saw that first trailer, it was like, nope.
Oh my god!
Now the collective internet's just like
talking about that trailer.
Yeah,
I was so baffled, and I mentioned it at the show like so many times. I woke up and I was like you. I'm not the biggest fan of his movies, but Victoria loves his movies.
He woke me up and said,
I like 2007. I like Halloween 2007. 2 has its fans. I think it's interesting for sure. But Lords of Salem, I really like. Devil's Rejects, I think, is his big magnum opus. I love Devil's Rejects. So I was excited. I'm like, hey man, he loves the Munsters. I saw MTV Cribs. He's got fucking Munsters everything. So, like I'm down for this. And it took me at least 4 watches of that trailer because I was like, no, maybe like they uploaded the wrong thing or I don't know what the hell it is. And I woke her up. It was like 6 or 7 in the morning, and I was like, what is this? What's going on here? Said it to Gabe.
I don't know.
Look at it.
Gabe made me feel crazy because Gabe just likes anything Rob Zombie's going to put out. So he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It looks like a great trailer to me. No, I can't be the only one that thinks this. But luckily, the internet.
I feel like sweating, searching it up on Twitter, seeing if anyone else dislikes it.
I do what all these Lord of the Rings fans are doing right now. Somebody must hate this like me right now, and then they find all these other fucking videos.
Did you watch the trailer in black and white?
I did, actually, and it does look better in black and white. Looks way better in black and white.
You can tell that they must have shot it for black and white. He must have wanted it to be black and white, and they changed it, and he was like, fuck, fine. And so that's the colors and the lighting are just off in color. But yeah, that one's going to be fascinating. And then we get Hocus Pocus 2.
Yes.
We do. It's the same week as Smile as well. I'm interested in that. It looks interesting.
I'll be checking out Smile a little early. So I'm going, I'm in the 21st. I'm flying to Texas. I'm going to be going to Fantastic Fest with Sean Chandler. So we got 7 days of movies.
Damn.
And they're showing Terrifier 2. They're showing Smile, amongst some other things. So yeah, I don't know. Smile feels a little too truth or dare to me. I'm like, we've done this, haven't we? But I don't know. It might surprise me. We'll see. Well,
luckily, no Jeff Wadlow directing, so you're in the clear on that one. But guys, it's been a great episode. Great talking about The Thing. Cody, thank you so much for jumping aboard, and it's been awesome, man. We can't wait to see.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah,
no problem.
like crazy. Thank you.
To anybody else, thank you for joining in tonight. Everybody, if you're new to the channel, make sure to like, comment, subscribe to Cody. I'm guessing all of you have come from Cody, so you already subscribed to him. You're watching
subscribe
the
here.
Yes.
Minions.
Now, Minions.
Guys, have a great night. We'll see you next week on my favorite horror movie, and that's going to be Jennifer's Body with Destiny Faulkner. So Karen Kuzma's Jennifer's Body. It's got this huge cult following now.
My girl.
I'm excited. I haven't seen it.
It's a Criterion. It was on the Criterion channel.
And it's a kind of part of the Criterion collection. So it's got that little bit of prestige on 35 millimeter. So everyone, have a great night, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.